So welcome to this latest video 162 Maths, and in this video we'll be going over a GCSE Maths topic test on solving quadratics. Now, as always, before we go through some exam questions, I'll talk you through what it is you actually need to revise, and a copy of the questions that we go through in this video are available for you to download by simply clicking on the link in the description. And I'll also include some lesson links if you're struggling to understand concepts of some of the things that are covered in this video. Now, before we get started working through some past exam questions related to solving quadratics, let's just have a quick overview over some key principles of this particular topic, and also, and more importantly, what it is you actually need to revise. Now, in terms of what you need to know, you need to be able to know when an equation is a quadratic. So if your highest degree of x is a 2, in other words, if you've got an x squared in there, then more often than not it's going to be a quadratic, where x squared is the highest power of x, not just an x squared, because obviously you can have cubic equations that involve an x squared, but actually it's not quadratic because it's a cubic. Now, before solving any quadratic equation, you have to make sure it's equal to 0. This is really important, whether you're factorizing or using the quadratic formula. You need to make sure it's equal to 0. It just makes a lot more sense doing that. Now, the next thing is know the methods on how to solve and when to use each one. Now, for this, what I've tried to do is just do a little bit of a breakdown over the methods that you can use and which one you use to solve a quadratic. Now, actually, I'm going to go back on something that I've just said, in the fact that if you have an x squared and a constant, so for example, if I had x squared minus, let's say, 16 equals 0, then for this, I could use difference 2 squares, or spot that it's difference 2 squares. But also what I could do is solve this algebraically by taking the 16 over to the other side and then going to make x the subject. So x would equal plus minus square root of 4, so x equals plus minus 2. So if you've got an x squared number, now that wouldn't work if I had x squared equals, let's say, or no, let me go for another one. So let's say if I had x squared minus, let's say, 10. Then equals 0. So then from this, I don't need to use brackets. It's not dots because 10 is not a square number. I'd take the 10 over to the other side, and then when you square root, just remember that plus and minus, because more often than not you're going to end up with 2 values. So then if you've got an x squared and an x, then this is going to be a single bracket question. So an example of that would be if I just had x squared plus 5x equals 0. Then again, this is going to be, because there's no constant there apart from the 0, which we don't include, but I've got no constant, then what I would do is use a single bracket to factorize, and then from this either x equals 0 or x plus 5 equals 0, in which x equals minus 5. So they're my two solutions. So if you have an x squared and something x, then it's going to be a single bracket. Now, if you have an x squared, an x, and a constant, which is more often than not, it's going to involve double brackets and to factorize, in which if there's no mention of decimals or rounding, then there's a good chance it will factorize. However, if it does mention any rounding, or you're not confident in your rounding, then you can solve a quadratic by using the quadratic formula. The only time you would lose marks by using the quadratic formula is if it said solve by factorizing or solve by using completing the square, and if you then went on to use the quadratic formula, you wouldn't get any marks for it, even if your answer is right, because you've not used what they've asked you to use. The next thing is if they ask you for exact values. Now, exact values basically means you either give your answer as a fraction or as a surd. Now, for this, you can either use the quadratic formula, which may involve a lot of working out and work of particular focus on negative numbers, or you could use completing the square. So again, options are going to be there. So if they mention anything about exact values, then again, you've got a couple of options which you can use, but basically do not give your answers decimal, particularly if you're on a calculator paper. It'd be very tempting to do that, but just make sure that your answers are going to be a surd or a fraction. The next thing, when asked to round to decimal places, they will usually tell you, but if they say give your answer as a decimal, then you need to decide whether you're going to round it to 1, 2, 3 decimal places or even significant figures. Me personally, I would always opt for 2 digits after the decimal point, so just for a little bit of a level of accuracy. Now, the next thing is knowing how many solutions you should have. Now, as we mentioned, more often than not, when solving quadratics, you end up with 2 solutions. And the reason why you have two solutions is because a quadratic produces a parabola, like a U shape or an N shape. And basically what your answers are saying to you, it tells you where your parabola crosses the x-axis. So it's actually these two numbers here. Now, if you had a parabola, then you could have a parabola that crosses the x-axis twice. You could have a parabola that crosses it once, in which then the x-axis is a tangent. And you can also have a parabola where it doesn't cross at all, in which there's going to be no solution. So here we've got two solutions, here we've got one solution, and here we've got no solutions because the parabola does not cross the x-axis. Now typically you may think that if you end up with 0 or math error on your calculator, that will usually imply there's no solutions or you've made a mistake, and you would just have to be the judge as to what that's going to be. We'll have a look through some exam questions where it does ask you to show that there's how many solutions there are, in which sometimes the answer may be 0. And again, you may doubt your answer, but that could be the actual answer. So again, if you're ever unsure, just have a go at the question again, or in an exam, do a few more questions and then come back and redo that question again without looking at your own existing working to see if you get the same answer. Now, a little reminder that if you're wanting access to these questions, all you need to do is just simply click on the link in the description. And if you're wanting some more in detail lessons on these particular topics, then again, I'll include links in the description. So looking at question 1, it says solve x squared minus x minus 6 equals 0. Now in this, there's no indication about rounding, all with decimals, so we can assume that this is going to be able to factorize. So again, we want to make sure that it is equal to 0, which it is. And then all we need to do is then think of two numbers that multiply together give me minus 6 and added together give me minus 1. So here our numbers are going to be x and 3 and 2. And it's as this symbol here is a negative, then that's going to be the sign of my bigger number, which is 3. So that's going to be minus. And because this sign here is negative, means the signs inside the brackets are going to be different. So there it's going to be plus 2. And again, don't forget to write equals 0. So then from this we can then work out what the answers are going to be. So here either x minus 3 equals 0 or x plus 2 equals 0, in which x equals positive 3 or x equals minus 2. Then moving on to question 2, it says a quadratic equation factorizes to 3x plus 1, 7x minus 2 equals 0. Write down the exact roots as fractions. So again, what we need to do is make each of the brackets equal to 0 as the equation is equal to 0. Again, do not forget that. So here we've got 3x plus 1 equals 0 or 7x minus 2 equals 0. So in here we've got 3x equals minus 1, so x equals minus 1/3. And here we've got 7x equals 2, so x equals 2 over 7. So in there, I just need to write down the answers as fractions, in which I get that. Moving on to question 3, it says find the solutions of 2y squared minus 3y equals 0. So again, first things first, we know it's quadratic because we've got a y squared, and so we've got to make it equal to 0, which it is. Now here, because we've got no constant, we've got no number, then that basically means that this is going to be a single bracket question. So here, a common factor between 2y squared and 3y is y. So then factorizing this with respect to y, I get this. And then from this, what we can then do is then establish that either y equals 0 or the bracket equals 0. In which this is already a solution, so then 2y equals 3, so y equals 3 over 2 or 1.5. So again, any of those answers you prefer, so 0 or 3 over 2 or 1.5. Again, it's tied up to which one of those two you go for. Moving on to question 4, it says find the solutions of p squared minus 169 equals 0. So again, quadratic, make it equal to 0. Don't know why I tried to cross it out there. And from this, what we should be able to spot is that this is a difference of two squares. Well, we've got two square numbers being subtracted. So therefore, to get p squared, I multiply p by p, and to get 169, I get 13. So again, don't forget the minus, and one's a plus, one's a minus. So here our answer is going to be plus or minus 13. Or you could write the answers elongated. It's entirely up to you. Then moving on to question 5, it says solve m squared plus 5m minus 10 equals 0 and give your answers as decimals. Now because it mentions this, I'm not going to worry about factorizing. I'm just going to go straight into using the quadratic formula. So again, first things first, make it sure it's equal to 0 and then state your A, B, C values. So A equals 1, B equals positive 5 and C equals negative 10. So then substituting numbers into the formula, it's going to be minus 5 plus minus square root of 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times minus 10, all divided by 2 times 1. Now if you're going to enter on your calculator, that's what I do, but just be mindful of a couple of things. Be careful with this value here, which is minus b. Now notice how it's the opposite sign of whatever this is. So if b is negative in your original equation, then when you substitute it in, that part there is going to be positive because two negatives make a positive. And if it's positive, like it is in this example, it's going to start with a minus. The next thing to be mindful of is this bit here. Particularly if you're using a calculator, remember to put negative numbers in brackets. Always put negative numbers in brackets and leave the square outside. Another thing that I always like to do is I like to put the 4ac in brackets, but again not essential in some cases, and we'll go from there. Let me just get rid of it. I don't know why I've put that little dash there. Oh, that's because it was 1. Can't read my own handwriting. And so yeah, so if you type that all in and it comes out correctly, you should have an answer of minus 6.53 or 1.53, and that's been rounded to 2 decimal places. Moving on to question 6, it says how many solutions does this quadratic equation have? And it says that we need to explain our answer. So if I just go straight into using the quadratic formula, so I've got A equals 1, B equals 3 and C equals 5. Then substituting it in, I get x equals minus 3 plus minus 3 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5, all divided by 2 times 1. Now if I simplify that, I get minus 3 plus minus 9 minus 20 over 2. And then I end up with minus 3 plus minus 9, take away 20, which is minus 11 over 2. Now from this, if you try type this into your calculator, you're going to get a math error, but basically there are no solutions, and the reason for that is because of this. You can't square root a negative number. So therefore there are no solutions to this, so the answer is going to be 0. You could also go along the lines of trying to find the minimum point and see that the minimum point is going to be above the x-axis, so therefore there are no solutions. You could also say that it's not going to cross the x-axis, but again you'll need to show evidence of that, because again it does say that you must explain your answer. Moving on to question 7, it says solve 2x squared plus 9x plus 4 equals 0, and you must show your working. So let's have a look at working this one out. So again, the fact that it doesn't mention any form of negative decimals generally implies to me that this can factorize. Now if this does factorize, and let me just double check that it does, in which yep. So let's have a look at factorizing. Alternatively, you could just go get into the quadratic formula, so you can either factorize or use the formula as we're solving. So if you factorize, we've got 2 times 4, which is 8. So the magic number equals 8. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply together give me 8, added together give me 9. So that's going to be 8 and 1. So we've got 2x squared plus 8x plus 1x plus 4. Factorising the pairs, we get 2x, x plus 4. And then we get 1x plus 4. So my double brackets are going to be 2x plus 1 and x plus 4 equals 0. So then from this I can get x equals minus a half or minus 4. If I use the formula, A equals 2, B equals 9, C equals 4. And if you are using the quadratic formula, you need to make sure that you're showing the substitution. So x equals minus 9 plus minus root 81 minus 4 times 2 times 4, all divided by 2 times 2. And again, you should get the answers of minus 0.5 or minus 4. Moving on to question 8, it says solve 3x squared equals 7x plus 2. Give your answers to 2 decimal places. So again, this basically implies that we've got to use the formula. Now this we need to make sure it's equal to 0. So we've got 3x squared minus 7x minus 2 equals 0. I would always advise keeping your x squared positive. So from this we've got a equals 3, b equals minus 7 and c equals minus 2. So substituting the values in, I get minus 7. And again, always try and keep those negative numbers in brackets. And then minus 7 squared minus 4 times 3 times minus 2. All divided by 2 times 3. Now if you can, I would strongly recommend that try and simplify this before sticking it on the calculator. So this becomes positive 7. This becomes 49. This becomes 12 times minus 2, which is minus 24, and the bottom equals 6. So I've got 7 plus minus root 49 plus 24 all over 6. Now if I type that into my calculator, I should have an answer of 2.59 or minus 0.26, and that's been rounded to 2 decimal places. Moving on to question 9, it says solve x, and then we've got 2x minus 5 equals 8. Give your answer to 2 decimal places. Sorry, I can't see the question. So then looking at this, this is going to basically imply using the formula. And what I need to do is make this equal to 0. So expanding this out, we get x, 2x squared minus 5x equals 8. So 2x squared minus 5x minus 8 equals 0. So then using the quadratic formula, I get a equals 2, b equals minus 5, and c equals minus 8. So then substituting numbers in, I get minus 5, which is positive 5, plus minus 25 squared is 25, minus 4 times 2 times minus 8, all divided by 2 times 2. So then substituting those in, I get 5 plus minus 25 plus 2 times 4 is 8 times 8 is minus 64. So I should have minus 64, all divided by 4. And then so simplifying that, I get 5 plus minus 25 plus 64 is 89 over 4. Now it becomes a lot easier for me to enter this on the calculator, in which I get an answer of 3.61 or minus 1.11, and there to 2 decimal places. Moving on to question 10, it says find the roots of 3x squared minus 10x minus 4 equals 0. Give your answer to 3 significant figures. So again, here we're using the formula. So I've got to make sure that this is equal to 0, which it is. So a equals 3, b equals minus 10, and c equals minus 4. So lots of negatives here. So then substituting that all into the formula, get minus 10, which is positive 10, plus minus 10 squared is 100, minus 4 times 3 times minus 4, all divided by 2 times a, which is 6. So then x equals 10 plus minus 100. 4 times 3 is 12 times minus 4 is going to be minus 48, and all over 6. So I get 10 plus minus root 148 divided by 6, and type that all into my calculator. I get an answer of 3.69 or minus 0.361. Now with this one, you just need to be careful because it says to 3 sig fig. 0 does not count as a significant figure, so you need to go that one extra. So just be mindful of that. and they are to 3 significant figures. Moving on to question 11, it says, without expanding any brackets, show how to work out the exact solutions of 9x minus 2 all squared equals 16. Give your answer solutions to the equation. So for this, what we need to do is not expand the brackets, but we need to get rid of the 9. So we've got x minus 2 squared equals 16 over 9. We then get rid of the square, so x minus 2 equals plus minus the square root of 16 over 9. Now, square root of 16 over 9 is going to be the square root of 16 over the square root of 9, so that's going to be 4 over 3. So I've got x minus 2 equals plus minus 4 over 3. Then take the 2 over, so x equals 2 plus minus 4 over 3. Then from this, what we then need to do, well, you can either leave your answer like that, or we could actually work it out. So here, just doing some simple equivalent fractions, we can write this as 6 over 3 plus minus 4 over 3. So either one solution is going to be 2 over 3 and the other solution is going to be 10 over 3. So there are our two answers. Then moving on to our last question, it says the equation of x squared plus bx plus c equals 0 has roots of minus 3 and minus 6. Work out the values of b and c. Well, if these are the answers, then that's basically the opposite should be what's inside our brackets. So to get a value of minus 3, it means we must have x plus 3 in one bracket, and for one answer to be minus 6, then we need to have plus 6. Now another reason why I know it's going to be this is because where it's not been simplified is because I've got single x squared. So just be mindful of that. And that's one of the reasons why we don't have, let's say, like an answer of, let's go for 2x plus 12, where with one of the brackets, because then I'd have 2x equals minus 12 and x equals minus 12 over 2, so x equals 6. But note how this is different to this. The reason why it's not this is because I've got a single x squared, so I know then it's just a single x inside the brackets. So then going on to solve this, which we can then expand the brackets. So I'm going to get x squared plus 6x plus 3x plus 18 equals 0. So x squared equals 9x plus 18. So b equals 9 and c equals 18. And there we go.